Blog Talk Radio.
Archangels, ghosts, and Bigfoot, oh my. It's just another night for Supernatural Girls. Real stories, real answers to life's biggest supernatural mysteries. And now, for another exciting interview with paranormal experts from this world and others. Here's your host, paranormal researcher Patricia Baker, on the one, the only, Supernatural Girls.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls Radio. It is, oh my God, time's moving too fast. It's April 12th, 2023, and we have a VIP with us tonight. We have James Martin. He is going to be setting us all straight on real history, not the stuff we were fed when we were in school. We're going to hear the real deal from James tonight, all the way from France. He has staying up late to talk to us, and we're very grateful. But first, PK, what's going on? How are you doing in Tucson?
Well, a little warm because it's 90 today for a change.
Wow.
It's wonderful. It feels good. But I thought I'd take a look at the new moon, which is coming up. And we haven't talked about that in some time, but the new moon is going to be April 20th. So those of you that are interested have a couple of weeks to get your new moon wishes put together. And it happens 13 times a year. The sun and the moon are in the same sign at the same time. So the new moon is very important for you because it gives a lot of extra energy, and it allows you to get some clarity about your wishes and ideas to set your wishes to paper. So each new moon is an opportunity to make 10 wishes around the moon sign. These 10 wishes need to be made within 48 hours of the new moon, and they need to be in writing. So put them up and revisit them as you go throughout the year so you can see how these things have worked out for you and if your wishes have come true. The new moon is supercharged as we have a solar eclipse happening at the same time. So this is also a year when we have two new moons in the same sign, which adds to the power of this new moon. So add the Aries and Mars energy. Aries is the ruler of Mars, so there's going to be a lot of power going on for the next 6 months. So it's an excellent time for you to put pen to paper and tuck it away so you can follow through to see how well it worked. Never hurts
Oh, that's
to try.
excellent. Yes, that's excellent. Well, I'm going to start on that right away, so I'll be ready.
I'm going to.
When this thing
I can write it better than I can speak it. My voice is very craggly with our winds here.
Uh-oh.
Good. But it's okay.
Well,
I'll survive because it feels good.
Good. Well, good. And again, I want to mention to everybody that on our homepage for supernaturalgirls.com, we have a whole bunch of incredible leading-edge health products. So take a look there, and take a look especially at the Endolight band, because that thing's amazing. I've been using it every day. You put it on only for a half an hour in the morning, and if you want, a half an hour at night. So this is not something that you wear all the time. It's very high-tech. It's very powerful, 7 times more powerful than their earlier watch, the Spectra Plus, which I also have. But this thing is really incredible. It's very youthening, it's very energizing, and there's also 3 different modes. So if you're ready to go to sleep and you want to wear the Endolight band, you can use the sleep mode, which I love because then I'm out like a light for the whole night. So it works great. So take a look on our website, because if you want to order something and you go through our website link and you use the code Supernatural Girls, you will get about $100 off the price of this Endolight band. So make sure you go there. And if you have any questions about it, then just send me an email. I'll be happy to answer them. And I was just in touch with the company Weber Medical today in Germany, And I have invited Dr. Weber back on the show to talk about all of his latest inventions, including the Endolight band, so you can hear all of what he's been doing and offering to people. And if you recall, during his last interview, we talked at length about the IV laser. This thing is an IV that sends laser light through your entire bloodstream. It is amazing. And unfortunately, there's nobody near me that has this thing. But I have talked to people who have had the treatment up in New Hampshire or out in California where they have these clinics that have this technology. And some of them have had terrible Lyme disease, horrible symptoms, fatigue, not able to function. They said after one session with this IV laser, they walked out of the office like a new person. So this technology is absolutely brilliant, and it works. And again, when you buy something like an Endolight band, you're taking your health, as I always say, into your own hands. So check it out, and we'll be sure to let you know when Dr. Weber is going to be on to give us all the details about the laser and how he has devised these things for us to use at home and in clinics. It's just amazing stuff. So I have so much running through my little mind right now, but mostly I'm so excited to finally have James Martin here to tell us the truth, because we have talked at length about how we've been lied to. And let's face it, it's not just about being lied to right now, about contemporary America, politics, whatever. This stuff started, these lies started a long time ago. So James is here to tell us what really happened. Now, James is a British trade unionist, historian, economist, and lecturer, having previously worked in finance, employment law, and now is a lecturer in further and higher education. As an historian, James believes that, understanding the past is crucial to understanding our future. Isn't that the truth?
Well,
Noting that evidence, yes, should guide us, but our minds should be open to ideas. Now, James has studied a wide range of fields, including industrial relations, equalities, history and politics, OSH, and astronomy, and has recently completed a Doctor of Education to further his role as a lecturer. James has taught for a number of academic institutions, ranging from Ruskin, Oxford, to Northern College. Now, he's also, in our neck of the woods, a member and investigator of the Worsley Paranormal Group since its founding in 2003. He has made numerous appearances on radio and television and is a regular on Night Vision Radio. He has described himself as a history geek and a space nerd, and has dedicated a large portion of his more recent life to research into one of our favorite topics, the Knights Templar, the Roman Empire, and the Western traditions of spirituality. So, James, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's well, good evening, everyone, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you're listening. It's good to be with you.
It's what, 1:30 in the morning in France right now, where you are?
Yeah. Which, is usually the time that I'm up and awake anyway, so it's not too late.
Oh, you night owl, you. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight, because
we're grateful.
Yeah, we are so grateful. And you have a beautiful new book called Uncharted, a rediscovered history of voyages to the Americas before Columbus. And you co-authored this with the late Tim Wallace-Murphy, a dear friend of yours, right?
Yeah, Tim started this book, or certainly in note format, back in 2014. And when we met and started to cultivate our friendship, it was pretty quickly that we had mutual interests in not just the Knights Templar and history generally, but this topic of pre-Columbian voyages. It, for me, was a very exciting field. And at the time, I was studying my master's, oddly enough, in economics, history, and politics. And there was one part I was studying was actually about the Old Norse or the Vikings, looking at how they were trading across the North Atlantic. And for me, it didn't seem that controversial at all that Europeans and others had discovered the Americas before the time of Columbus. I mean, of course, what we have to remember is the people who really discovered the Americas were the people already living there. But if we look to the old worlds of Asia and Europe, we know that the Vikings made it, certainly to Newfoundland in northern Canada, and perhaps even further south. So it just didn't seem too controversial, but oh boy, suggesting anything like, there might be Roman galleys in Rio, Phoenicians in Phoenix, and the Greeks sailing around Southern America, that's dismissed as ridiculous. And really, I think the whole point of this book is to really to try and correct the record, and not to educate people, but to prompt questions, to get people to disprove or prove, but research themselves. So there's a lot of questions, and yes, there are some points of view that we take in the book, but really this should be part of a quest for the truth.
What is the point of lying to us about this? I mean, why do they want us to hold on so tightly to this belief about Columbus? So,
for example, just to answer this question with something that's in the book, there was a submarine archaeologist, in other words, a diver who liked looking for old objects. And he was digging, this is Robert Marks, and he was digging in the bay at Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. In fact, the bay was called by the locals the Bay of Jars. And he undertook a submarine dig back in October of 1982 and discovered a series of Roman amphorae. Now, amphorae are basically containers that would, which would carry wine and oils and things like this. Not only that, but he suggested he had also discovered 2 Roman galleys just outside the port of Rio. Now, it is very exciting news. You can imagine the first thing that you do if you're digging or you discover something, especially if you're not in your own country, is to go and report this to the authorities. And Marx wasn't expecting the response from the Brazilian government, which was to revoke any further digging licenses and to ask him to leave the country. I think he had a day's a day to pack and to get out. Curiously, though, a few years later, when he was allowed to return after the Brazilian dictator, I forget his name, was ousted, he went to explore the site and had found that it had been covered with mud, sand, and silt. The explanation by the Brazilian government was that it interrupted the origin story of that country. In fact, it so deeply offended the government, any suggestion that firstly Romans, these pagans, would have discovered a now Catholic country, that was seen as very religiously offensive. And also the myth of the foundation of Brazil, I think by the explorer Cabral of Portugal, it interrupted all of this. And in a strange way, it sort of answers the question with a point. Why on earth do people or governments lie or be economic with the truth, I think I would prefer. Well, in the introduction, by the way, I'm surprised you didn't have to pause for breath in the introduction there. That was a full introduction for me. Thank you, Patricia. But as you listeners, anyone who's listening, you'll have heard I'm a lecturer, and my job is, to an extent, dependent on teaching a curriculum that is provided, let's say. Mm-hmm. Now, I could, if I wanted to, go into my lectures or go into my classes, and I could say, do you know what? I know we've got to cover this, but we're not going to. In fact, everything that we've covered so far is nonsense. I could do that. The slight problem is, if I'm looking to pay my bills the next month, I'm going to find a few problems.
Oh gosh, risky business.
I think, yeah, I think that is the other side. If your job is dependent on repeating the same narrative, then you're not going to challenge it. And I think we have seen, really since the middle of the 1990s, with the spread of the internet, the ability to share information, that some of the things that we've all grown up with, you know, Columbus in 1492 sailed the ocean blue. Actually, what I would propose to everyone listening is, in 1492, Columbus discovered nothing new.
Well, that's more appropriate. That's the truth.
Right.
Oh my gosh,
amazing.
I love it. I don't know why, but that little clicking noise started to come back to haunt us. It sounds like a metronome is playing in the background, so I don't know if you can adjust your microphone again. But it's
yes, I'll do that. Apologies for that. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, okay. It comes and goes, but it's back now. So, anyways, I don't know if there's anything you can do to... There it goes. It stopped. Nope. Then it started. Ay. All right.
It has a
well, it's got a mind
of
of its own. Yes. PK, you and I are taking like...
If it helps, I have just been on mute for the past 10 seconds, but I'm not too sure. Either way, if I find a tennis court or a metronome anywhere, I'll tell everyone to stop.
It's exactly. Just say, knock it off. We don't need the metronome tonight. There it is. It stopped. Yeah. Okay, listen to you. All right. So, yeah, it's so troubling because there are a number of archaeologists that have tried to set the record straight about a lot of things, about giants, about the ancient times of civilization that are much more ancient than anybody ever thought. And they're met with just tremendous pushback. So it's very difficult for people like you to try to straighten it out and tell the truth and say, no, Columbus wasn't the first one here. You know, there were many that came before him. And stop giving him credit. Plus, it sounds like Columbus wasn't the nicest guy in the world either.
No, and that's an understatement too. He really was quite a horrendous character, to be fair. As I think so many people that we venerate can be. I mean, just on the speaking the truth, my grandma had a... God rest her soul. My grandma had a saying which was always speak the truth. That way you don't need a good memory. Well,
so true.
You know, and with archaeology, you know, this is something I've studied for 6 months. As part of a degree. The reality with archaeology tends to be, it's not archaeology and finds are not found by people who are qualified. They're found by people digging in their garden, amateur archaeologists, things like that. So I do resent this very arrogant academic world that sort of says, oh, well, because you haven't gone to this university, you're not allowed an opinion. The debate is actually very toxic. I mean, of course, this book's out, so if anyone's wanting to look at Uncharted, Google search James Martin and then Uncharted, or Tim Wallace-Murphy, Uncharted, or do the same. You can Audible, if you do a search for Uncharted, James Martin, Uncharted, Tim Wallace-Murphy, you can listen to the audio book version as well.
Yes, right. Yep. So it's when I know you've been embarking on telling the truth about a lot of things, not just history, but also the Knights Templar, and which is a big topic in your life, and Rosslyn Chapel and all that goes along with it. So you're deep into a lot of these mysteries, which is very exciting. Now, do any of those things tie in with Americas being discovered previous to Columbus?
It's possible. I mean, I'm currently writing a second book about that very point. But there is an interesting group of people around the 1360s who I should just explain that the Norse had been island hopping really since about 850, 800 AD, leaving Norway, Denmark, to Britain, then to Iceland, to Greenland, to Newfoundland. And as they moved, as they migrated, they settled. So they settled in Iceland, and then found that they'd named it incorrectly because who wanted to go to a place full of ice. So when they moved to Greenland, they call it Greenland, trying to attract colonists. True story, by the way.
Wow.
And as they colonized, Greenland had a eastern, western, and middle settlement. And by 1350, the population was about 3,000 people. And the Earth went into what we call the Little Ice Age, or the Mini Ice Age, period of glaciation. And weather conditions began to get substantially cooler from 1350, really until the outset of the Industrial Revolution in the 1750s. And, well, what happened to those people who found that gradually they couldn't feed themselves, the land was no longer providing. So where did they go? We know of a handful who ended up back in Europe, but the other 2,950, where did they go? And there's a voyage. The Pope, in fact, had said on 2 occasions that we must try and find the last pagans of Europe, as the Pope referred. And he was referring, of course, the Greenlanders. And there was another expedition, which famously, I think, in some circles is called the Zeno voyage. And the Zeno voyages were essentially a group of merchants from Italy who sailed up to Orkney and met up with someone who, if you know the Templars, you will know the surname, someone called Henry Sinclair. He was the Earl of Orkney. Now, Orkney, or the Orkneys, are a group of islands off the extreme northeast of Scotland. So it's pretty cold. If you're planning the trip, make sure you've got a coat, minimum. And if you don't like the cold, go and have a look at some pictures. But it's quite a tough place to live. And Henry Sinclair, who, his descendants would build Rosslyn, goes on this very obscure expedition with these Italian merchants, the Zeno brothers, and heads over to a place called Markalanda, Vinland, and Halland. Now, the Vikings, 300 years previous, had referred to Vinland, perhaps New England, by the way, as the place of wine, it's fertile land. Markaland, the place of woods. So I think we're really dealing with northern Canada here. And then you've got Helluland, which is the rocky, barren place where nothing grows. And then 300 years later, the Henry Sinclair is using, or the Zeno brothers are using the same language. So I think we're talking about an expedition to try and find what happened to those Greenlanders. Why would Sinclair be doing this? Well, he was descended from not just Normans, Normandy now in northern France, which literally means the place of the Norse, or the Norse, the northerly people, but also on other sides of his family were actual Vikings and Norse settlers. So he's, for me, trying to look at for some of his family, if indeed the voyage occurred. And so off they went. Now, what we also now find in New England, and I think not too far away from you, Patricia, are some very interesting places, such as the Westford Knight, very interesting stone carving, which again, academics refer, oh no, it's just weathering on a rock. Well, I've never seen any form of weathering that manages to carve the shield of Clan Gun. Clan Gun being allies of the Sinclair family. You also have the infamous tower at Newport in Rhode Island, which has the hallmarks of a building tradition that perhaps started with the Knights Templar. Now, I'm going to have to let you down gently. We're in the 1360s. We know that the Templars were disbanded in 1312. So we're talking perhaps of the descendants of Templars, not actual Knights Templars. But again, I'm writing about this, so hey, I might have to come back, Patricia, and eat my own words.
We'll see when you come back to talk about your next book, right? But what you're describing is so interesting, James, because our history here is so much more exotic and than anybody ever thought. I mean, we were, like I said, we were sold a bill of goods on Columbus from. I remember this in the 6th grade, learning about getting that beaten into our heads, the name of the ships and all that kind of stuff. And to find out that it's really not true, that they didn't discover America is shocking. And yet, at the same time, we hear lately all these other stories, like Egyptian artifacts and hieroglyphics in the Grand Canyon, for God's sake. So, there's so much that has been hidden from us, and I find it appalling. It's just lie upon lie upon lie, and they just don't want us to know the truth because it upsets their stupid little narrative. And like you said, maybe it's upsetting the religious construct of a certain country or whatever, but there's just too many things that have been hidden away, that where there's archaeological proof, and they just don't want us to know about it. I don't know. I find it frustrating. What do you think about that? I mean, do you find it as frustrating as PK and I do?
Of course I find it frustrating. It goes like this. I speak to my classes when covering history, and I'll just say, to the average person, they weren't really interested in kings and queens. They were more interested in survival. So it beggars belief why we still learn about Henry VIII. Because most people at the time didn't really care who he was chopping the head off. And I suppose with that, you just mentioned the Egyptians there. There's a fascinating, and I'm going to have to, give a little bit of a warning. It's late here where I am, so I'm going to just speak about tobacco, drugs, and chocolate. Now, I think at least one of those is appropriate to talk about, maybe. But, of course, what I'm referring to are the so-called cocaine mummies that have been found in Egypt. These are mummies now residing in museums, from the Museum of Natural History in Paris right the way through to the Manchester Museum in northwestern England. And, back in 1976, and this is how far back this goes, Dr. Michelle Lescott, who is curator of the Museum of Natural History of Paris, received various samples of mummified remains that, when using a scanning electron microscope, discovered grains of tobacco clinging to the fibres of the mummy's bandages. Further to that, it wasn't just tobacco, but you had what she thought initially was contamination. Perhaps the Victorians who were manhandling these mummies had, dropped some tobacco, but then further examination was undertaken, this time by Dr. Balabanova, who looked at the intestinal tissue from Ramses and found traces of cannabis, cocoa, and tobacco
Thank goodness.
within his body cells. Yeah. Then, again, in 1992, Egyptian mummies were flown from the Cairo Museum to the it's the Museum of Archaeology of Ancient History in Munich, where Dr. Balabanova undertakes some further test samples and yet again finds nicotine and cocaine. Now, I don't know, are we suggesting that the pharaohs were having quite an exciting party? Maybe, but the key question is, it certainly puts a different slant on that song, Walk Like an Egyptian, doesn't it? But
yes, it does.
Good grief.
Yeah, but the key really is tobacco, cocaine, cocoa, etc., hails from the New World. It hails from Central and Southern America. How on earth did it find its way over to ancient Egypt? And not only that, I mean, without getting into my religious background, let's just say the Old Testament is a little more familiar than the New for me. You've then got the corn in Egypt, and here is the next strange thing, where we found historian Gunnar Thompson described hundreds, I think it built up into the thousands of depictions of corn, as in American corn. We're not talking about Indian corn, which is a very different plant, looks similar, but American corn and in temples and in depictions from papyrus to the stone carving. So again, the question is, logically, how on earth did that happen? Now, I don't know if you like corn. I've been told by some people when I've done various shows that the way I cook corn cobs is wrong. It needs to be grilled. But I quite like mine boiled.
Either way is fine.
But I tell you, the first thing I noticed when I put the corn cob into the pan is it sinks straight to the bottom of the pan. And in fact, if you were to put a corn cob, from maize from the US, if we were to put that into, let's say, salt water, it would still sink. So we can rule out the idea that the corn cob floated over the ocean and then found its way happily to Egypt, and they then went, let's plant it and see what happens, because one, the corn cobs will be very deep at the bottom of the ocean, and two, the salt water would destroy the ability for that cob to germinate. So again, we've got the key problems here. It's depicted. We know at Rosslyn Chapel, for example, in the 1420s, 1440s, that there's a depiction of corn cob above the window to what is now called the crypt. It certainly wasn't a crypt historically. But so where's this coming from? Is the key question. You've got further back.
They had to have a trade route, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, if we could just move on to the area of time that I'm very comfortable with, which is the Roman period. So, mention the second book, I'm writing about the rise and then the downfall of the Knights Templar. So obviously I've started in ancient Rome, and people who know me have just raised their eyebrows and gone, well, yeah, of course you would. But let's just we think in today's society that we are much more advanced than the societies that have come before us. And it's just not true. Yes, we've got electricity. We're very reliant upon it. Without electricity, well, I imagine our ancestors would be pointing and laughing at us. What do you mean you don't know how to navigate by the stars, etc., etc.? Mm-hmm. And we tend to think that, cavemen, as being very primitive. Well, if you go into some of the caves in cave networks, for example, in southern France, you have the caves of Neo and the Trois Frères, Three Brothers. I've been into some of those caves and found artwork after a 6-kilometre, roughly 3.5 miles, 3.5-4 mile walk to see these cave paintings, which we don't know how they got into the caves because the entrances for us are accidental. Due to rock falls and all of this. You go in and you see these incredible works of art, and the first question that surely comes across your mind is, it's very dark in here. How did they light it?
Exactly.
And then we think, well, cavemen living in caves. Well, if I'm a time traveller and they're holding some sort of torch, all I need to do is blow out the torch, and then you've got a dead caveman. Because these places are absolutely black as night. So we shouldn't assume that we are so much more advanced than our ancestors who, Homo sapiens sapiens, think like us. They might not talk like us, they might have a different view of the world, but they certainly think like us. And if you have a look at the Romans, for example, well, the Romans had grain vessels that could carry 550 tons. You had, for example, the Emperor Caligula, which, do you know what Caligula means, by the way?
No.
Oh, this should make you chuckle. Caligula means little boots.
Little boots?
Quite literally. Little boots or little shoes. So insult or that was his nickname. His real name was Gaius. But he wanted to carry one of these huge obelisks from Egypt to Rome and built a vessel that was so large it could carry 1,450 tons. That would not be... Well, that wouldn't be succeeded in our times until the 1700s. So, again, we're not looking at primitive people here. And they knew how to sail. We know that the Romans, someone called Ptolemy, describes a voyage around Britain to Iceland. The place, he says that it smells like Vulcan, literally it's volcanic and all of this. It smells like sulfur. We know that they travelled long distances. But here's just another thing. if you measure the distance from end to end of the Mediterranean, from the Straits of Gibraltar right the way to the place called the Gulf of Iskenderun, roughly the Gulf of Alexander, that's 2,500 miles running from west to east. But the distance from Africa to South America is 1,600 miles.
Mm-hmm.
That's 900 miles shorter. Are we really suggesting it's not possible that there was indeed a trade route? And perhaps the trade routes, I mean, we know the Egyptians were sailing in very large ocean-going vessels to a place they called Punt, today's Somalia perhaps. A very long voyage indeed. We know that they were doing that. We know that the Chinese had fleets of tens of thousands. The Admiral Zheng He commanded a fleet that I think 10, 20,000 vessels, if not more, to Africa. It's quite possible that he carried on and discovered the Americas. We really shouldn't look at the people of yesterday with such derision, as if they're primitive, because I think we'll find part of the understanding of the truth is they had some very advanced ideas. Quick question.
They had to have, yeah. They had to, and yeah, go ahead. And I have a question for you then.
Yeah, so when I was just thinking, I was in a coffee shop about 6-7 years ago in the UK, and there was a guy from New Zealand, but he was Polynesian by birth, and I was, remarking about how the Polynesians were travelling between islands, and it's such a vast distance in the Pacific from island to island, and how did they do it? Because no charts have been found. And he said, "Oh no, we didn't have charts. We had songs. We sang our way." Now, that was incredible for me to think of, and it just made me think, if you live in a city, you won't be able to see the stars, you'll be able to see light pollution.
Mm-hmm.
And as such, you won't notice little changes in the heavens. For our ancestors, it was the version of the TV. Every minor detail was spotted and understood. And that's how they navigated. Could we do what they did back then, today?
No.
Probably not.
No, because you're talking about the difference. I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish it. You're talking about the difference between technology, following technology, and versus following nature. Very big difference. I'm sorry, PK. Go ahead. I know you had a question or comment.
That's all right. Because of the distance between. How were they able to keep their supplies that they needed for food and for water, since they were so far, such a large distance between spaces and places?
Well, the Polynesians had an ability to not just fish. Their vessels were sort of catamarans. They could fish, but also collect the main water. If you look at the Vikings, the Norse, as they're island hopping, they're never more than a few days away from land. The benefit of doing that is that you can pull in to get supplies, etc., etc. And if anyone's thinking that the Polynesian argument is somehow incorrect, or it's speculation. Well, again, I've got some news, because a large group of Polynesians had their DNA tested, and what it found, this study was actually on Easter Island, of all places, and what they found is most of the population had DNA that was inherited from people who were living on the Caribbean side of northern Colombia.
Wow.
from 800 years previous. So again, we're really not talking about speculation here. I'm really saying, I mean, this was peer reviewed, it appeared in Nature, and all of that. So I'm not sure how much evidence we can throw at the problem for certain academics and media outlets to actually accept that Columbus wasn't first.
Yeah, this was going to be one of my questions to ask you about, but let me just go to a commercial for a minute, and we'll be right back. And I have more questions about a fascinating topic. We are talking to James Martin. He is the author of a brand new book called Uncharted, A Rediscovered History of Voyages to the Americas Before Columbus. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back.
The health benefits of sunlight to our body are well known. Light energizes, light lifts your mood, and light can heal. What if all these benefits were combined into one portable device that you can use in the comfort of your home? The German medical device manufacturer Weber Medical has recently launched the Endolight Band. The Endolight Band looks like a smartwatch, but does so much more. This revolutionary band is equipped with true laser diodes that irradiate the circulating blood via your arteries. Each color provides its own powerful benefits. Red and infrared light deliver energy and regulate your immune system and blood pressure. Yellow is a real mood booster and improves sleep quality. Green impacts oxygen supply, and blue has anti-inflammatory effects. The Endolight Band has 3 programs. Recharge helps you start your day with energy. If you want to unwind and clear your head after a busy day, select Relax. When you need full support, select Recover, activating all diodes at the same time for the full range of effects. Improve your well-being at the touch of a button. 30 minutes per day gives you the advantage, and there are no side effects. Let the Endolight Band bring you a healthier life. Order now at www.wmedicalsystems.com. That's www.wmedicalsystems.com.
And we're back, everybody. We are speaking with James Martin, who is the author of a brand new book, Uncharted, A Rediscovered History of Voyages to the Americas Before Columbus. You can get your own copy now. It is also available as an audiobook. So if you don't like to read anymore, you can just listen. And it's a great book. So, James, we're talking about some really fascinating things that have gone on in history and been fairly ignored. But here's another one. I was told that if the Egyptians and the cavemen, whatever, were using just like torches or some type of a gas lamp to bring light into these very dark caves or very dark temples, that there would have been soot on the walls, and there wasn't any. Have you heard that?
Yeah. I mean, it was one of the... I've been to the caves at Neo, as I say, that lovely 4-mile walk, very narrow passages. I certainly went on a diet the next time I went. One of the questions to the archaeologist who was with us was, and based at that site, was there's no evidence of any soot. In fact, what's more, there was no examples of any cooking or anything like this. No bones were found. Now, that could be explained by animals taken away, maybe, but equally, no evidence of charring on the ground, which would not normally indicate some sort of cooking. And again, no soot. And curiously, a lot of the very deep and dark monuments and caves, etc., are in places that are acoustically perfect. I mean, one of the things that I had the great privilege to do on 2 occasions was to, well, perhaps not for everyone who was with me, but sing a few songs in those caves, and it was my hairs were on end. Yeah. And by the way, just another point. Anyone listening, if you think you're cheating by listening to an audiobook, can I just say, written history is only about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. How else did we tell our stories before that? through word of mouth and listening.
Right.
That's right. Very true.
Yes. Yes. It's so fascinating and frustrating at the same time. Because as you mentioned right before we went to break, what does it take to get people to see the truth? What does it take to get them to understand that, no, Columbus did not discover America? We got a whole other history here that we need to take a look at. What does it take to change people's minds?
There's various places of interest. Now, what we have to do is we have to approach things with a degree of healthy skepticism. We can't jump immediately to whether we're using, I don't know, a flying hoverboard. We can't do that. What we need to do is look at as many facts as we can and come to a conclusion. It's a theory of gravity, but if you don't believe in the theory, then I'd suggest you walk over to a cliff and try your luck. I think we can accept gravity exists.
Right.
And for a long time, a lot of those theories were dismissed as this is nonsense. I mean, the church only, I think it was 1964. The Catholic Church, I should say, only accepted finally that Galileo was right, after all, that the Earth goes round the sun. These things take time, but it's exciting. If you understand that, why is it people are continuing a particular narrative? Firstly, we all have to survive, so money, is that it? Secondly, there are some people who fervently believe that no, it has to be Columbus, whether it's a religious belief, whether it's that's what they were brought up with. Having the worst sorts of people I've ever come across range from those who are ideologically fixed. Nothing, no arguments, nothing like that will change their view, even though you can throw evidence. Okay. Then on the other side, you've got academics who, these absolute purist skeptics who just can't be flexible, despite questions. For everyone in the middle, a degree of flexibility is required, and patience, because this isn't going to change overnight. Lancer Meadow, which for me and you means something like Jellyfish Cove in Newfoundland. The United Nations, UNESCO, the site at Lancer Meadow in Newfoundland, accepted as a Viking, probably a ship repair facility. So they're repairing ships there. Where were the settlements? They're probably yet to be discovered. We're still in the age of exploration, and there are still those who are saying, the Earth's flat, and there are still people who are saying that, Columbus. But we need some patience and also some strength. It won't surprise you to learn that various of the purist skeptics have been right at the book and no, this is nonsense and all of that. Well, hey, the book doesn't open with everything in here is the truth. It opens up with an explanation that we're just trying to probe questions to allow people to, who might already be thinking, well, hold on, what about these Norse? What about all of that? Or perhaps even the fact that Columbus never set foot in the continental Americas. At best you could say Columbus landed on, I think, the island of Hispaniola. That's about it, really. And then just have a little look further back. When did he say 1492? Well, what's going on in Spain? Well, at the beginning of 1492, there wasn't a country called Spain. It's only later in that year that there's a unification of the two crowns of Castile and Aragon to form Spain, named after the old Roman province of Hispania. The very Catholic monarchy and a very Catholic country of Spain. And this is meant of no disrespect to people without faith, by the way. Undertake, firstly, the Reconquest or the Reconquista. They pushed the Moors out of southern Spain. The Moors being believers of Islam that had been there since the 8th century. So they reconquer the Iberian Peninsula, 1492. The Crown's unified, 1492. To that country's shame, and they have atoned for it, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain as Fardom, all of this, 1492. And then you're telling me that, just for more prestige to impress the Pope, they randomly discovered the New World. Well, what happened to all of the maps and the previous discoveries and all of this? What happened there? This is where it gets a little bit more interesting. What we have is a professor from the University of Milan back in 2018, part of a long research project, had discovered some notes from a monk based in the city of Genoa. Now, Genoa is not nowhere near a port, but it is near, it does have links, I should say, to some ports like Venice, to its east, and then over to its west, some ports. And essentially, Genoa is having to trade in order to feed its population, that kind of stuff. And there are a variety of... this is Milan. Genoa is one of the ports. But anyway, what he discovered was a monk... I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce it, but we'll just call him Flammel. He was writing in 1350 a history of the city of Milan. And in this text, the professor finds references to a land far beyond Spain and France and Britain, a place where it's eternally night or eternally day, where there are strange creatures, there are giants, which if you've ever met anyone from Scandinavia, you could certainly see where they were coming from. And then, crucially, from 1350, in Italy, there we've got the references again to Vinland, Markaland, and Helluland, in text that has been carbon dated, that has been verified. We know where the books have been in this story of Milan. So, and all of this is in the book. So, if Christopher Columbus is meant to be from Italy or from Spain, it doesn't matter. Aragon and Spain used to control southern Italy at this period. If traders, who are usually quite secretive of their, trading places, you don't want to interrupt their profit. Well, if they're openly discussing this in the trading ports of the Italian peninsula, then surely more people knew about, the New World than is being let on. And I think Columbus knew all of that, and I think my gut instinct is that he probably took a map. He likely interviewed traders, because if we do believe that he thought he was sailing off the edge of the earth, then you'd probably want some assurances. You'd speak to as many people as possible. I think he was aiming for the United States and landed in the wrong place.
Huh. How interesting. Amazing. Gosh, well, James, you've put together a lot of pieces of the puzzle. I mean, you've offered up some interesting proof in your book, and it's a fascinating read, and everybody should get it and get very clear on what our history was versus what we've been taught in school. And we're looking forward to your next book about the Knights Templar, because that's another great mystery, and I know you're working hard at uncovering a lot there, too. But we thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been very enlightening.
My pleasure.
The book is excellent.
Yes. And again, the name of the book, everybody, is Uncharted, A Rediscovered History of Voyages to the Americas Before Columbus. Well, James, thank you again for joining us. And again, everybody, we will be back next week with another great show. We're talking about healing the relationship we have or don't have with our ancestors. Be sure to join us. Until then, we will see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next week for another radio adventure with Supernatural.